Daniel stared at the receipt on the table. It wasn't the total that bothered him. He could buy the entire restaurant without blinking. But what it represented. Across from him, Jessica was busy typing on her phone, the light from the screen illuminating a face that was objectively beautiful but currently wore a bored expression. "Did you order the vintage champagne?" Daniel asked quietly. Jessica didn't look up. The waiter said it was the best. "You know I get a headache if I drink the cheap stuff, Daniel. Why are you being so stingy tonight?" He wasn't being stingy. He had bought her a diamond bracelet 2 days ago because she said her wrist felt bare. He had paid off her half-year's debts last month, but looking at her now, checking her reflection in her spoon to make sure her lipstick was perfect, Daniel felt a profound hollowness in his chest. She didn't love him. She loved the access he provided. She loved the way doors opened when he walked up to them. "I'm just tired, Jessica," he said, signaling for the waiter. "Well, don't be," she snapped, finally locking eyes with him. "My friends are coming over to the lounge later. I need you to be charming. And Daniel, try to look like you're enjoying yourself. People talk." That was it. The realization hit him with the clarity of a bell ringing in a silent room. He couldn't do this anymore. But he also knew Jessica. If he tried to break up with her normally, she would make a scene. She would cry to his mother, she would leak stories to the press, and she would drag the process out until he paid her a settlement just to leave. He needed her to leave him. He needed to wound her pride so deeply that she wouldn't want to look back. The idea came to him on the drive home, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. Jessica hated anything she considered low class. She hated mess. She hated anything that threatened her status as the queen of his world. If he wanted to drive her away, he didn't need a fight. He needed a replacement. And not just any replacement, someone so completely opposite to Jessica that it would insult her very existence. The next morning, Daniel drove his secondary car, a sleek black sedan, into a neighborhood Jessica wouldn't be caught dead in. The GPS led him to a busy construction site on the outskirts of town, a place where the air smelled of wet cement, dust, and roasted corn. He parked and stepped out, immediately feeling out of place in his tailored suit. He scanned the workers hauling blocks until he spotted the one he'd been told about. "We don't need architects here, Ogre," a voice called out. It was a woman standing atop a scaffold, deftly tapping a brick into place with a trowel. She wore paint-splattered cargo pants, a faded t-shirt, and her hair was tucked under a dusty bandana. "I'm not an architect," Daniel said, stepping over a pile of sand. "I'm looking for a bricklayer named Grace. I was told she's the best with stone facades." The woman climbed down the ladder, wiping cement-stained hands on a rag. She was shorter than him, but held herself with a scrappy, undeniable confidence. "You're looking at her, but if you're here to complain about a wall, talk to the foreman." "I have a job for you," Daniel said, "but it's not on a building." Grace laughed, a rough, dry sound. "I don't do landscaping, and I definitely don't move furniture." "I need you to pretend to be my partner," Daniel blurted out. Grace stopped wiping her hands. She looked him up and down, her eyes narrowing. "You rich people are weird. Look, man, I have cement mixing. I have a quota." She turned back to the mixer. "I'll pay you," Daniel said quickly, 500,000 naira for one evening. Grace froze. She turned back slowly. That amount was more than she made in 4 months of hauling heavy blocks under the sun. Daniel saw the calculation in her eyes. She needed the money. He could see it in the worn soles of her boots and the calluses on her palms. "What's the catch?" she asked suspiciously. "I have to kill someone?" "No," Daniel smiled, feeling the plan click into place. "You just have to make my girlfriend hate you. I need you to come to my house, dress sharp, and act like you own the place. I need you to be convincing." Grace crossed her arms, leaving a dust mark on her sleeve. She looked at his expensive watch, then at his desperate eyes. "Fine," she grunted, "but I'm not wearing a dress." "A suite," Daniel agreed. "Definitely a suit." 2 nights later, the transformation was complete. Daniel had taken Grace to a high-end tailor, ignoring the judgmental looks of the staff. When Grace stepped out of the dressing room in a fitted charcoal suit, hair slicked back, she looked different. The cement dust was gone, scrubbed away to reveal smooth skin and sharp features. She looked handsome, dangerous, and entirely cool. "Stop staring," Grace muttered, adjusting her cuffs. "I feel like a penguin." You look perfect, Daniel said. Just remember the plan. You're the love of my life. You're everything she isn't. They waited in Daniel's sprawling living room. When the front door opened, the click-clack of Jessica's heels echoed on the marble floor. She walked in, carrying shopping bags, already talking. Daniel, you won't believe the incompetence at the salon, I told them. She stopped. She dropped the bags. Grace was sitting on the leather sofa, legs crossed, one arm draped casually over the backrest. Daniel sat next to her, closer than was necessary. Jessica, Daniel said, his voice steady, there's someone I want you to meet. This is Grace, my partner. Jessica blinked, her eyes darting between Daniel and the woman in the suit. Partner? Like, business partner? Grace stood up. She moved with a swagger that couldn't be taught. She walked right up to Jessica, invading her personal space, and smirked. Not business, sweetheart. Pleasure. Grace wrapped an arm around Daniel's waist, pulling him in. Danny here finally decided to stop pretending. We've been together for a while. He just didn't know how to tell you. Jessica's face went pale, then red. Daniel, is this a joke? Who is this? This laborer? She could smell the faint, lingering scent of mortar beneath Grace's expensive cologne, or perhaps she just sensed the grit. She's the person who understands me, Daniel said, looking at Grace with a gaze that felt surprisingly easy to hold. You're leaving me for her? Jessica screeched. She looks like a man. She's beneath us, Daniel. Look at her hands. Grace held up a hand, inspecting her own fingernails, which were still rough from years of handling bricks. Rough hands, solid grip. Daniel doesn't mind. She winked at Daniel. Jessica made a noise of pure, strangled fury. She looked at Daniel, waiting for him to apologize, to say it was a prank. He didn't. He just stood there, anchored by Grace's arm. I'm done, Jessica spat. You are sick, Daniel. Keep your trash. I'm leaving. She stormed out, the heavy oak door slamming behind her with a finality that shook the windows. Silence descended on the room. Grace exhaled loudly and loosened her tie. Wow, she's loud. Daniel let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for years. Ideally, yes, but she's gone. He looked at Grace, really looked at her. You were amazing. The deal was done, but the charade needed a cool-down period just in case Jessica came snooping back. Over the next week, Grace kept coming around. It started as a business arrangement, but the atmosphere shifted. Daniel wasn't used to people who didn't want something from him. Grace didn't care about his art collection. She cared about the crumbling retaining wall in his garden that the landscapers had ignored. You treat this house like a museum, Grace scolded him one afternoon, mixing a small batch of mortar in a bucket. Houses need to breathe, Daniel, and this wall is about to collapse. I don't know how to fix it, Daniel admitted, handing her a trowel. That's why you have me. She smirked, a smudge of cement on her cheek. They spent hours in the garden. She taught him how to lay a brick straight, laughing when he struggled with the level. He ordered pizza, cheap greasy pepperoni that Jessica would have forbidden, and they ate it sitting on the patio she was repairing. So what's your story, rich boy? Grace asked, chewing a crust. Why let a witch like Jessica control you? I hate conflict, Daniel admitted, and I thought that was just how relationships were. Transactional. That's sad, Grace said bluntly. Real love isn't a transaction. It's a foundation. If the base is weak, the whole wall falls down. Daniel looked at her. She was wearing her old cargo pants again, her hair messy, wiping tomato sauce from her lip. She was more real than anyone he had ever known. He realized he wasn't just tolerating her presence, he was looking forward to it. She grounded him. She made the big, empty house feel like a home. It was a Friday evening, 2 weeks after Jessica left. The city skyline glittered in the distance, viewed from Daniel's expansive balcony. They were drinking beer, Grace's choice, straight from the bottle. The banter had died down, replaced by a comfortable silence. The air was warm, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden below. I should probably get going, Grace said, though she didn't move. The meter on this fake relationship is probably running high. Daniel turned to lean against the railing, facing her. You know I'm not paying you by the hour anymore, Grace. Yeah, well, I can't mooch off you forever. She looked down, kicking at the stone floor with her boot. It's been fun, though, pretending to be fancy. You didn't have to pretend to be confident. Daniel said softly. "I admire that about you. You know exactly who you are." Grace looked up, her eyes wide and vulnerable for the first time. "I have to be. I don't have a safety net, Daniel. If I fall, I hit the concrete." "I wouldn't let you fall," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and true. He reached out, his hand brushing hers on the railing. Grace didn't pull away. The distance between them closed naturally, drawn together by a gravity neither could resist. When he kissed her, it wasn't a performance. It was desperate and sweet, tasting of beer and longing. "Stay," he whispered against her lips. "Daniel, I don't belong here," she murmured, her voice trembling. "You belong where you're wanted," he replied. One thing led to another. They moved from the balcony to the bedroom, the luxury of his world fading away until it was just two people finding solace in the dark. The morning sun was cruel. It flooded the room, illuminating the silk sheets and the opulence of Daniel's life. Grace woke up first. Panic set in instantly. She looked at Daniel sleeping peacefully, his arm thrown over the space where she lay. A wave of shame washed over her. What had she done? She was a bricklayer from the gutter. He was a billionaire. Last night was a mistake, a moment of weakness that would destroy her if she let it continue. He would wake up and realize he had made a mistake. He would see the dust under her nails and remember who she really was. She couldn't handle that rejection. Grace scrambled out of bed, dressed quietly, and slipped out the side door before the house staff arrived. When Daniel woke, the bed was cold. He called her. Straight to voicemail. He texted. No reply. By the afternoon, the silence was deafening. He drove to the construction site. Grace was there, carrying a heavy stack of blocks, her back stiff. "Grace," he said, approaching her. She didn't turn around. "Job's over, Daniel." "What?" "After last night." She spun around, her eyes hard and defensive. "Last night was a mistake. Look at me, Daniel. Look at this place. I build walls. You own cities. We had a deal. The deal is done. Here." She shoved a wad of cash at him, half of what he'd paid her. "I don't want your charity." "It wasn't charity," he pleaded, hurt flashing across his face. "I thought we had something." "You thought wrong," she lied, her heart breaking in her chest. "Go back to your palace. Leave me alone." She picked up another block, the physical exertion masking her trembling hands. Daniel stood there for a long minute, then turned and walked away. 2 days later, when he returned to try again, the foreman told him Grace had quit. She had changed her number and left town. Daniel was crushed. In his vulnerability, he let his guard down. Jessica, sensing blood in the water, contacted his mother, Eleanor. Jessica played the penitent sinner, crying about how much she missed Daniel. Eleanor, a woman who believed in second chances and didn't know the full extent of Jessica's greed, pressured Daniel. "Just hear her out, son," Elena urged. "People make mistakes." Too tired to fight, Daniel agreed to let Jessica back into his life, strictly on probation. 3 months later, in a dusty town 4 hours away, Grace was falling apart. She had found a small job at a local building site, but the work was heavy and she was constantly exhausted. She felt sick all the time. Dizzy spells hit her while she was mixing cement. Nausea rolled over her, in waves. Finally, she went to a local clinic. The smell of antiseptic made her gag. The doctor, a stern man with thick glasses, ran some tests and came back with a clipboard. "You're pregnant, Miss Grace," he said flatly. The room spun. "Pregnant? Twins," he added. "You're about 12 weeks along." Grace sat on the thin paper of the exam table, unable to breathe. Twins, Daniel's twins. She was alone, living in a one-room shack with a leaking roof. She had no savings, no family, and no future. How could she bring 2 children into this misery? She looked at the doctor, tears welling up. I can't have them." "Doctor, please. I have nothing." The doctor frowned. "I don't do that here. It's unethical." "Please," she begged, grabbing his arm. "I'm begging you. My life is over if I have these babies." He looked at her desperation, then lowered his voice. "There is a procedure. It is risky, and it costs money. 300,000 naira. 300,000. It might as well have been 1 billion. But fear drove her. For the next week, Grace sold everything she had of value. She sold her best trowels and levels. She sold the few nice clothes she had bought with Daniel's money. She starved herself to save on food. She worked double shifts, hauling sand until she fainted. She managed to scrape together N100,000. Grace returned to the clinic, gaunt and trembling, placing the crumpled notes on the doctor's desk. "It's all I have. Please, help me." The doctor looked at the money, then at her belly. Something in him shifted. Maybe it was her frailty, or maybe it was his own conscience catching up to him. He pushed the money back. "No. I'll get the rest later, I swear." "No," he said firmly, "I won't do it. Not for any amount." "Those children are a blessing, young woman. Keep your money. Go home." He walked out, leaving her alone in the office. Grace stared at the door, her last hope extinguished. Grace walked blindly away from the clinic. She didn't know where she was going. She walked until her legs gave out, collapsing on a grassy verge by the side of a quiet road. She curled into a ball, sobbing. The sound was raw and ugly, the sound of a spirit breaking. She was going to be a mother to 2 children she couldn't feed. She was going to repeat the cycle of poverty she had fought so hard to escape. A silver SUV slowed down and pulled over. A window rolled down. "My dear," a gentle voice called out, "are you all right?" Grace couldn't stop crying. The car door opened and an older woman stepped out. She was dressed elegantly, with kind eyes and silver hair tied in a bun. "Oh, you poor thing," the woman said, kneeling in the grass beside Grace, heedless of her expensive skirt. She put a hand on Grace's shoulder. "Breathe, just breathe." "I can't," Grace gasped. "I have nowhere. I have nothing." "What is it? Is it money? Are you hurt?" "I'm pregnant," Grace choked out. "Twins, and I'm all alone. I don't have a mother. I don't have anyone." The older woman's face softened into profound sadness. She pulled Grace into a hug, rocking her. "Shush, you are not alone anymore. God does not make mistakes." The woman helped Grace stand up. "My name is Eleanor. My house is big, and it is very quiet. You will come with me." "I can't impose," Grace whispered, though she was leaning all her weight on Eleanor. "Nonsense," Elena said firmly. "You need a mother. I will be your mother. You can call me Mama. Now get in the car." Grace got in. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She had no idea that the woman saving her was the mother of the man she was running from. Life at Elena's house was a dream. Grace, who introduced herself simply as Grace, was given a guest room with soft pillows and a view of the garden. Elena fed her, took her to proper doctors, and fussed over her growing belly. Elena was lonely. Her son was busy in the city, and her husband had passed years ago. Grace filled the silence with her stories, carefully edited, and her help around the house. "You are a good girl, Grace," Eleanor said one evening over tea. "I don't care what trouble you are in. You have a good heart." "Thank you, Mama," Grace said, rubbing her stomach. She was 6 months along now. The twins were heavy. Elena's phone rang. "Hello, Daniel. How are you, my son?" Grace froze, her teacup rattling in the saucer. Daniel. It was a common name. It had to be a coincidence. "You're coming to visit?" Elena beamed. "This weekend? Oh, that is wonderful. Yes, I have a guest. A lovely girl. You will like her. She is sturdy, honest." Elena hung up, glowing. "My son is coming on Saturday. You must meet him. He works too hard." Grace felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. I should probably stay in my room. I don't want to intrude." "Nonsense," Elena said. "Grace will cook your famous jollof rice." Saturday arrived. The morning was chaotic. Elena received a frantic call from the local hospital. Her childhood friend had taken a turn for the worse. "I have to go, Grace," Elena said, grabbing her purse. "Daniel will be here in an hour. Please, welcome him. Offer him a drink. I will be back as soon as I can." Elena rushed out, leaving Grace alone in the massive house. Grace paced the living room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She smoothed her maternity dress. It would be fine. It wasn't that, Daniel. Then the doorbell rang. Grace took a deep breath and opened the heavy front door. "Hi, Mum, I got here early." Daniel stopped mid-sentence. Grace stood frozen in the doorway, one hand instinctively covering her swollen belly. They stared at each other for an eternity. The silence was thick, suffocating. Daniel looked older, tired, but his eyes widened in shock as they traveled from her face down to her stomach. "Grace," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Daniel," she breathed, You You're pregnant." He stepped inside, looking around as if checking he was in the right house. "You're the girl my mother took in?" "I didn't know," Grace said quickly, backing away. "I didn't know she was your mother. I swear, Daniel, I wasn't trying to find you." Daniel walked closer, his eyes locked on her stomach. "Are they?" "Yes," Grace whispered. She couldn't lie. "Not now. They're yours." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, looking like he had been struck by lightning. "Why did you run? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because we are from different worlds," Grace cried, the hormones and the fear spilling over. "Look at you. Look at me. I was a laborer you hired. I was afraid you'd think I trapped you." "I never thought that," Daniel said intensely. "I looked for you. I went to the site. You vanished." Before he could reach her, his phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the tension. Daniel pulled it out. The screen flashed Jessica. Grace saw the name. She flinched. Daniel answered, distracted. "Hello, Jessica?" "Yes." "Yes, I'm at my mother's. Look, I can't talk right now." He listened for a moment, then sighed, a habit kicking in. "Okay, I know. Love you too. Bye." He hung up and looked at Grace. Her face was a mask of betrayal. "You're back with her," Grace said flatly. "It's complicated," Daniel stammered. "She came back. My mom pressured me." "Grace, wait." "You just told her you loved her," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "I was right to run. I'm just a mistake, Daniel. Go back to your plastic doll." "She means nothing," Daniel shouted, losing his cool. "You're the one who left me. You're the one who is jealous." "I am not jealous," Grace yelled back. "Yes, you are. You love me and you're too stubborn to admit it." The front door opened. Eleanor stood there, breathless. She looked from Daniel's flushed face to Grace's tears. "What is going on?" Eleanor demanded. Daniel turned to his mother. "Mom, this is Grace, the bricklayer I told you about, the one I cared about." He pointed to Grace's stomach. "And those are my children." Eleanor dropped her purse. Her mouth fell open, then a smile of pure, blinding joy broke across her face. "Grandchildren?" She rushed to Grace, hugging her tight. "Oh my God, this is a miracle." Daniel watched them, clarity washing over him. He looked at the woman he loved and the mother who had saved her. He looked at his phone, where Jessica's last text message sat. "I'm done with complications," Daniel said firmly. "Mom, take care of Grace. I have something I need to finish." Daniel drove straight to Jessica's apartment. He didn't go inside. He met her in the lobby. "Daniel?" Jessica smiled, reaching for him. "You're back early." "We're done, Jessica," he said. His voice was ice cold. "What? Because of your mom?" "Because of me. Because I don't love you. And because I know about your uncle who pays for your trips to Dubai." Jessica's face hardened. "You can't dump me. I'll ruin you." "Try it," Daniel said. "I found her, Jessica. I found the real thing. Do whatever you want, but stay away from me." He walked away, leaving her screaming in the lobby. Jessica was consumed by a rage that felt like poison. Over the next few days, she stalked Daniel's social media. She saw a photo a paparazzi snapped of Daniel, Eleanor, and a heavily pregnant Grace shopping for cribs. They looked happy. Jessica snapped. She drove to an abandoned construction site on the edge of town, a place where bad men gathered. She found a man she knew by reputation, a thug for hire. "I want her gone," Jessica hissed, showing him a picture of Grace on her phone. "The pregnant one. Make it look like an accident." The hitman took the phone. He squinted at the screen. Then he looked at Jessica with disgust. "This is the bricklayer from 4th E Street, the man said. "So?" "She helped me rebuild my mother's fence for free after the storm. She gave me water when I was thirsty." The man tossed the phone back to Jessica. "Get out of here. If you touch her, I'll come for you." Jessica snatched her phone, shaking with fury. "Useless. All of you are useless." She stormed out of the building, blinded by tears of rage. She didn't look left. She didn't look right. She stepped onto the road just as a speeding taxi came around the bend. The impact was sickening. Jessica woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. The doctor stood over her, his face grave. "Your spinal cord was severed, Miss Jessica," he said softly. "You will never walk again." Jessica stared at the ceiling. No Daniel, no money, no legs to carry her away. Her jealousy had cost her everything. 2 months later, the waiting room of the private hospital was filled with pacing. Daniel walked a groove into the floor tiles. Elena sat praying with a rosary. A nurse pushed open the double doors. "Mr. Daniel, you can come in now." Daniel rushed into the room. Grace looked tired, her hair matted with sweat, but her face was glowing. In her arms were 2 small bundles wrapped in blue blankets. "Meet your sons," Grace whispered hoarsely. "Leo and Liam." Daniel approached the bed with reverence. He looked down at the tiny, wrinkled faces. One of them yawned. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. He kissed Grace's forehead. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for staying." Elena came in next, cooing and crying, claiming they had the family nose. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and diaper changes, but Daniel was there for every moment. He learned to hold a bottle, he learned to burp a baby, and he learned that he loved the chaos of family far more than the silence of luxury. A year later, the garden of Elena's house was transformed with white flowers and fairy lights. Grace stood in front of a mirror. She wasn't wearing a suit today. She wore a simple, elegant white gown that flowed around her. Elena adjusted the veil, her eyes shining. "You look beautiful, my daughter," Elena said. "I'm nervous, Mama," Grace admitted. "Don't be. He has loved you since the day you put dust on his face." Grace walked down the aisle. Leo and Liam, now toddling and dressed in tiny tuxedos, stumbled, ahead of her, drawing laughter from the guests. At the altar, Daniel waited. He looked at Grace, the bricklayer who had fixed his wall and then fixed his heart. "I promise," Daniel said during his vows, holding her rough, capable hands in his, "to love you through the dust and the glamour, in this world and any other." "I promise," Grace replied, "to never run away again." They kissed, and the applause was loud enough to scare the pigeons from the roof. It had been a messy, painful, complicated road, winding through lies and heartbreak. But as Grace looked at her husband, her children, and her new mother, she knew they had arrived exactly where they were meant to be. 3 years had passed, and the twins, Leo and Liam, were balls of chaotic energy that no nanny could keep up with. Grace, however, had a way with them, usually by involving them in projects in the backyard with plastic shovels. Life was good, but Daniel was unraveling. His company had taken on its biggest project yet, the Horizon Center, a massive community complex meant to serve the underprivileged parts of the city. It was supposed to be his legacy, something to prove he wasn't just about high-rise condos. But for weeks the project had been plagued by delays, structural failures, and angry calls from the board. One evening, Daniel paced the living room, shouting into his phone, "I don't care about the rain. The foundation is cracking. If the engineers can't figure it out, fire them." He slammed the phone down, rubbing his temples. He didn't notice Grace standing in the doorway, wiping paint off her hands from a mural she was painting in the boys' room. "You're doing it again," she said softly. Daniel looked up, startled. "Doing what?" "Being the billionaire, thinking you can yell at concrete until it hardens." She walked over and took his hand. It was shaking. "What's the real problem, Daniel?" "The walls keep developing hairline fractures," he admitted, sinking into the sofa. "We've tested the cement, the steel, everything. It's costing millions. The board wants to pull the plug." Grace thought for a moment. "Take me there." "What?" "Grace, it's a construction site. It's dangerous, and I was laying bricks before I was drinking your fancy wine," she cut in with a smirk. "Take me there." The next morning they arrived at the site. The foreman, a large man named Tunde, looked nervous to see the boss's wife, dressed in jeans and boots, climbing out of the luxury car. Grace didn't wait for a tour. She walked straight to the problem area, a half-built retaining wall. She ran her hand over the rough surface. She scraped a bit of the dried mortar with her fingernail and tasted it. Daniel grimaced. "Grace, that's dirt." "It's salty," she said, spitting it out. She turned to Tunde, her eyes sharp. "Where are you getting the sand?" Tunde shifted uncomfortably. "From the supplier, Ma. Standard river sand." "This isn't river sand," Grace said, her voice rising so the workers could hear. "This is sea sand. It has salt in it. The salt eats the steel and weakens the bond. That's why it's cracking." She switched to Pidgin, addressing the workers directly. "Who supplied this sand? Don't lie to me. I know the difference between dredge and beach." A young worker stepped forward and looking terrified. "It was the subcontractor, Ma. He said it was cheaper. He pocketed the difference. Daniel stood stunned. His expensive engineers had run computer models and stress tests, but they hadn't tasted the sand. They hadn't looked at the basics. "Fire the subcontractor," Daniel said to Tunda, his voice cold, "and get fresh river sand. Grace will approve the next batch personally." As they walked back to the car, Daniel looked at his wife with a renewed sense of awe. "You just saved the project," Grace shrugged, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You can't build something strong if you cheat on the ingredients, Daniel. You taught me that about love. I'm teaching you that about brick." 2 years later, the Horizon Center stood tall and proud, a bustling hub of activity. It had a library, a clinic, and a vocational training school for young tradespeople. It was opening day. The press was there, cameras flashing, waiting for a speech from the billionaire philanthropist. Daniel stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. In the front row sat Eleanor, holding the hands of 5-year-old Leo and Liam, who were miraculously sitting still. Next to them was Grace, wearing a simple blue dress, looking uncomfortable with the attention, but radiant. "I built this building," Daniel began, his voice amplified across the square, "but I didn't build the foundation. A building is only as good as the hands that lay the stones." He paused, looking directly at Grace. "My wife, Grace, taught me that value isn't in the price tag. It's in the integrity of the work. That is why this center isn't just a building. It's a promise." He gestured for her to come up. Grace hesitated, then walked up the steps. The crowd cheered, not the polite applause of high society, but the raucous, genuine cheering of the community, who knew she was one of them. Grace leaned into the microphone. "I used to think there were two worlds," she said, her voice steady, "the world of dust and the world of diamonds. I thought they couldn't touch, but I was wrong. We are all just trying to build something that lasts. Whether you are mixing cement or signing checks, you have to show up. You have to be real." She looked down at her sons, then at Eleanor, and finally at Daniel. "We built this together," she said, "and we're just getting started." Later that evening, after the crowds had gone, the family walked through the quiet halls of the center. They stopped in the vocational wing, where rows of new trowels and levels hung on the wall. Leo picked up a small trowel, weighing it in his hand. "Heavy," he said. "It gets lighter," Grace said, crouching down to his level, "but only if you use it every day." Daniel put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. They walked out into the cool evening air, the building rising behind them, solid, honest, and enduring. It was no longer just his money or her labor. It was their legacy, standing firm against the sky, proof that the strongest things in life are the ones you build with your own hands together.